Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with John Wilson's new recording of Carousel on Chandos. Do I really need to tell you to get this? I mean, you heard the Oklahoma. You know he does this stuff terrifically. He's got a lot of the same cast as he had in Oklahoma. These people know what they're doing. You get the complete musical with like all the stuff that it's supposed to have in it. I mean, it's a good 106 minutes of music here. 60 minutes on the first disc and 46 on the second. There's ultra act music. There's the Carousel waltz. I mean, come on, just go get it, and we could spare ourselves, any amount of aggravation. But I'm going to tell you about it anyway. Don't worry. Fear not. We're going into the details a little bit. Carousel is an interesting musical. It was Rodgers and Hammerstein's second effort together. It was, 1945? And actually kind of interesting in terms of the story. It's based on a Hungarian play called Lilium, which is the hero by Lilium by, who's this guy? Ferenc Molnar. I don't know anything about the original play, although it was made into a movie with like Burgess Meredith and things like that. It's a very strange story for a musical. Oh my goodness. First of all, it continues the trend that we began in Oklahoma of choosing stories that have the opportunity for character development and for a few serious overtones, almost like Mozart did with the Da Ponte operas. He took their comedies basically, but there's a lot else besides. A wider look at the human condition and an end to just sort of slapstick stuff. I mean, there's some profundity here. I hate to use the word, but there really is. I mean, you know it when you get the story. The story is quite simple. I mean, there's this guy who's a carnival, Billy Bigelow. He's a carnival barker. He works at a carnival and he's in love with Julie Jordan, and they both get fired, and Julie gets pregnant, and he decides, he's gonna have to really, figure out a way to support his family. So he decides to rob a bank. Oh, by the way, it takes place in like coastal Maine and like lobster territory, clam bake territory in New England. So they all sing about clams and lobsters, which I love because I'm from New England, and that's, clams and lobsters are my specialty. Any kind of like food references I go for. Anyway, so he decides to rob a bank, and it doesn't go well. And because it doesn't go well, he commits suicide. I mean, this is a comedy, right? So he commits suicide and he goes to heaven. He's not quite allowed into heaven. He's at the pearly gates there. He's hanging out with this person named Starkeeper, very well sung by Matthew Seaton Young here. And the Starkeeper says to him, he sees his daughter is born and they're poor, and she grows up embittered and bullied because her father was a suicidal bank robber. So her pedigree is not of the finest. And he wants to go back to Earth to make things right. And of course, you know the story, right? The Starkeeper or God or whoever it is says, okay, you've got 1 day or 15 minutes or something to deal with it. No one can see you, but some people can, or they can only see you where they want to see you, or there's all that, magical falderall mixed up with it. So he goes back and to attend her high school graduation. And, he brings her a souvenir star, which she rejects. And then he basically makes it right. And because he makes it right, even though he is a domestic abuser and a suicidal bank robber, he finally gains admission to the great beyond. And it all ends happily, ultimately. But it's a very equivocal story. Strange story. It really is. I mean, some might even find it a little off-putting. I mean, today, especially because it deals with the redemption of someone who is a domestic abuser and a sort of a ne'er-do-well. But it has, the music is what does it. It really is. The music is astoundingly fine. First, there's the Carousel Waltz, which is sort of Viennese for New England. But I mean, the orchestrations in this were by let's see, Don Walker, who lived from 1907 to 1989, and they are gorgeous. There's lots of luscious harp and whatnot in the waltz music, and opposed by chattering xylophone and wood percussion for the more humorous elements, the more sardonic bits. It's very well designed to characterize the protagonists and what they're singing. And what they're singing. Well, the big numbers from Carousel. The first is June is Bustin' Out All Over, which I remember vividly because my mother had it as a single, the original cast recording, as a 45 RPM single that I used to play all the time when I was a kid. And then if I Loved You, that's the other big number. The biggest number is You'll Never Walk Alone, which is, when you walk through a storm, keep your head up high. You know that, right? This was part of American culture when I was growing up, not because we knew what it came from. I had no idea that it came from Carousel for many, many years. No, I saw that song because Jerry Lewis sang it at the end of every one of his muscular dystrophy telethons for like 40 years or something like that. However many years he did those things, he would always sing that song. And there was a thing because he couldn't get through it. He would break down. And it was a will Jerry Lewis get through You'll Never Walk Alone at the end of the telethon. And everybody would tune into the telethon. I remember sitting in my grandparents' parlor in Danbury, Connecticut, watching the telethon because we were always there on Labor Day. And there was just this sort of bet going on as whether or not Jerry Lewis would finish singing that song. And the fact that it came from Carousel and it was by Rodgers and Hammerstein, well, I didn't know until much, much, much later. But it was part of our musical DNA when I was growing up. And so, that and it's beautifully sung here, by the way. It really is. It's wonderful. It's sung by one of these, the song itself is like, let's see, who is it? Is it by Nettie Fowler? I forget which character sings it actually. Or Carrie Pipperidge, or I think it's Nettie Fowler. It's one of those songs that's like Climb Every Mountain, which is also by Rodgers and Hammerstein. Not surprisingly, right? It's a ballad of human fortitude. And it's designed to make you break down and sob, and it never fails. I mean, I just become a quivering heap whenever I hear it. And Richard Rodgers actually someone said to him, it's so emotional, I always cry whenever I hear it. And Richard Rodgers said, it's supposed to do that. That was the point. And boy, could he do it. So there is a certain, perhaps cynical manipulation of human emotion going on. But boy, does that song bring home the goods. Holy mackerel, it's amazing. So this is a gorgeous performance. I mean, John Wilson is just wonderful at this stuff. I think, some of his gifts are supra-musical. That is, he casts these things well. He's a very good producer. He's a very good accompanist. He's a lousy conductor of standard classical music most of the time, as his recordings on Chandos have also eloquently demonstrated. But in this material, he is absolutely, totally on point and does an absolutely fabulous job. And the sonics are terrific. And it's an amazing story. It's an amazing piece of musical theater. And you really need to add it to your collection if you like musical theater. I mean, opera, operetta, these things. It's all one big clump. And this is a gem, really a gem, first class in every respect. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.